This edition of MacVoices is sponsored by Casper, a better mattress for a better night's sleep. To find out more, try one for 100 days and get a $50 discount. Visit casper.com/MacVoices. And by MacVoices Magazine, our free Flipboard magazine that brings you some of the best Mac, iPhone, and iPad productivity tips on the web. High in signal, low in noise, just like MacVoices, MacVoices Magazine includes information on how you can get more out of your Apple technology. Subscribe at macvoices.com/magazine or search for MacVoices Magazine on Flipboard. Welcome to MacVoices. This is the Talk of the Mac community. I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, the last time we talked to today's guest was at WWDC a few years ago in a hotel room because I couldn't find anywhere else to record anything, and he was such a good sport. He came to the hotel room, sat against a wall. I think we were shooting across the bed, trying to make it look not like a hotel room and failing miserably. But I want to welcome back Justin Miller to MacVoices. Justin is of Mapbox. Justin, it's great to see you again. Thanks for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's good to be on again.
Justin, we talked about Mapbox before, and of course, nothing has changed in the world of maps at all. So I want to get you to start out by telling folks what Mapbox is, and then we'll get into what you've been up to and what's new. And
yeah, I think we probably talked like the day after or the day of Apple's original transition to Maps. So yeah, the landscape's changed a little bit. So what we do at Mapbox is we build developer tools for app developers and web developers to put maps into their apps, rather. And so it's mostly focused on custom maps and open source tools and just choice and variety. And then along with that, beauty and stability and everything with maps. And we basically think, especially on mobile, the location things is going to become a bigger and bigger part of the picture. And so that's where we're focusing with all of our tools. So developer-facing stuff that we want to power lots of apps behind the scenes.
I have to confess that I don't think a lot about maps from the standpoint of kind of where they come from. I expect them to come up in Apple Maps. I expect them to come up in Google Maps. And I expect them to come up in certain other applications. But I never really contemplated where all this information and these gorgeous maps are coming from. And that's Mapbox.
Yeah, so there's actually very, very few providers of global map data worldwide. It's like 3-4 companies. Google's one of them. Nokia's Here is another. And then another source, and where we get our data from, is OpenStreetMap, which is kind of like Wikipedia for maps. It's a crowdsourced effort. There's over 2 million contributors to the map, and it's basically changing nearly every second to be up to date with construction and build out and natural disasters and all kinds of things like that. And so we're hoping, we're basically betting on that model instead of like a much larger, by a factor of 10 or 100 sized company driving cars around the planet and flying drones and stuff like that in order to try to do it top down. It's basically a ground up collaborative effort. And so that's where the data behind it all comes. And then we've built a platform on top of adapting, using that data, staying up to date with it, and then building tools to use it and present it to developers, even those who wouldn't necessarily know like how to do mapping stuff or have to care where this data comes from. They just know that it's good and works and the tools do what they need to do.
My imagination almost gets boggled when I think about the kind of updates that you almost have to go through, because we all get really impatient if we punch that address in to our maps and it's not there. I think we were used to that a few years ago when you had disk-based navigation systems maybe built into your car or something that was loaded into a device and you had to update it and nobody ever updated it to any significant degree.
Right.
So you became used to the fact that it went out of date and maybe it wasn't going to be there. Now I'm kind of upset if I don't have the address that I want and it doesn't take me right to it.
Yeah, I think so. Speaking to like the upsetting part of things, another part of kind of the way we're tackling things with this collaborative effort is when you look at something like Google or Apple, it's kind of a black box as to how changes happen there. You kind of send in a correction maybe on a form, but you don't really have any sort of status other than checking back obsessively when something may have changed. Whereas an approach that's like an open data format, you can see the change, edit, and then what we're building on top of that, our expertise that we're trying to leverage here is basically turning those edits around inside of minutes so that they show up in all the apps at all the edges of the network. Without you having to do anything, or more importantly, the developer, who's building the app and leveraging the tools and the data to have to do anything in particular to get the stuff. So yeah, it's very much it's moving faster and faster paced, and I think the top down kind of model and trusting that the big giant data silo will be correct is increasingly getting a lot of pressure, and so that's kind of the area we're hoping to break into.
Again, Apple Maps, Google Maps, folks are familiar with those. But let's put that aside. What other kind of apps do you supply maps for? In other words, I'm an app developer, and I'm thinking about having some kind of map in my application. I know it's a little pie in the sky here because I don't have an application in mind. But I call you and I say, hey, I have this idea. What can you do for me? What does that process look like?
So honestly, it could be any kind of app. I mean, some of our existing customers are kind of the more location-focused social networks you might be familiar with, like Foursquare, Pinterest. But like data companies like GitHub will use it to visualize their data and their open source repositories and things like that. But really, it could be anything with a map component. And increasingly, one area we're also trying to get into is just location, outright location. Regardless of whether you're showing a map on the app, the device has location and context as part of it. That's part of mobile. It's on the move. And so the idea is you could evaluate that data. One of the things that we've just launched is a data dashboard that lets app developers see where their users are using the app. And it's in a very anonymized, aggregated way. It's not in a big brother-ish following way. And I can speak to that a little more. I mean, that's obviously a huge concern for a lot of people, and for us as well. But the idea that you could have a data dashboard that shows you that your app is, why is my app all of a sudden really popular in Jakarta, Indonesia? And you could be on top of it that day and understand what's going on and how your app is relating to some local trend, for example. And that's something we're not seeing a lot of service to in the current tools either. So it could be something you're kind of traditional. I want to see myself on the map, or I want to search for coffee or bagels or whatever near me on the map. But it could also be just by virtue of the fact that mobile devices have location context. You can add value to what your users do and also your understanding of the app that you're building and putting out there and how people use it.
You went somewhere exactly. That was going to be my next question, is the big brother part of it. Because it's one thing, I guess it's a similar thing. I don't want everybody to know too much about me, but enough, or maybe I want to control it. But suddenly now people can watch what I do, where I go, to your point, apps that I'm using and where I'm using them. And so this puts you all in a position of power, but also a position of responsibility for having to take care of this data in a reasonable, expected fashion.
Yeah, absolutely. That's it exactly. The responsibility is a big part of it, and something kind of a topic that we're trying to push in the space of developers who are dealing with location data is this idea of responsibility. I mean, what we've seen happen in light of recent events is, the government wouldn't necessarily have to tap into everybody's stuff. People will voluntarily share it with social networks and tools and developer tools, and then the government could just go after the kind of the narrow points of constriction of this data if they want to surveil or whatever's going on. And that said, and then it's also, there's potential for abuse within the company, willingly or unwillingly through, social engineering. Somebody could compromise an employee's account who has access to this location data that's being collected for apps, at an aggregate level. So there's all these different vectors that it's a security model that you have to kind of, pattern out and figure out what all the different vectors but more importantly, I think be transparent about it. That's something we've really tried to do is speak to the idea of the policy around it. So our company has roots in consulting with government organizations and nonprofits in Washington, D.C. That's our main headquarters. And so we're actually involved on the political side of things to help understand and to help people understand the responsibilities and the dangers around data like this. So, it's a hugely complex area, and we're trying to basically provide value with dashboards and things like that, but also be transparent about what we're doing and what we're thinking about and what we're advocating for in keeping this data secure, and then all the tech stuff that goes with that. So making sure data doesn't live on the device for very long, making sure that the device in the non-aggregated, non-anonymized format isn't kept around very long. And so we basically aggregate this stuff, and we can see these trends of cities or neighborhoods and then throw away the raw data as quick as possible so that we have there's no danger of it sitting around. We've just the aggregated trends rolling along. So that's kind of there's a lot to it. It's a hugely complicated topic, and that's something we're spending a lot of time on, as well as the technical side of stuff.
I don't want to get down this rat hole too far, but it's very I think it's very interesting, and it's encouraging that you are taking that responsibility seriously. That in fact, being in DC, you have the opportunity to maybe influence some of the decisions, or maybe not influence, educate the people making those decisions, so they at least understand a little better about what the impact is of their decisions. You say that
absolutely.
You say that you're trying to that you destroy or discard the raw data as quickly as possible. Define quickly as possible, and I'm sure it varies in certain circumstances. Are we talking hours, days, weeks?
Minutes, ideally.
Minutes.
Yeah, so we're trying, it doesn't live on the device itself for more than 60 seconds, and then when we get it into the servers, we're trying to discard it within minutes after being able to aggregate it. So we're already, we operate our whole business, and what we're doing on the networking side of things leverages Amazon Web Services. So that's our platform for all of our serving of maps and data, and also the input of the data. And we're doing that across all of their what they call availability zones in the world, which I think is 11. Basically all of Amazon's data centers worldwide. So we're operating at a pretty large scale already with some really fast real-time services. And so when we set out to design the data model around how we hold on to this data and aggregate it, and how we basically distrust ourselves, and from a systematic point of view, design it so that it can't fall down by throwing away this data as soon as possible. That was one of the goals. So yeah, we're talking minutes as far as how we try to aggregate it, get the general trends, and then get rid of the raw data so that it's not on our hands for any possible abuse.
We've seen, well, when the iBeacon technology was announced, there was so much discussion about you'll be walking down the street and you'll get a message on your phone, maybe now on your watch, about hey, this store is having this special, or there's that special deal on lunch across the street. Is that something that you all are getting involved in, and if so, what kind of challenges are you see in that area?
Yeah, so we've experimented technically on the beacon side of things. It's a little bit different. Most of what I've just previously been talking about is GPS related. So it's just latitude and longitude, where the device is, occasionally altitude, which you can glean info from. But the beacon stuff is basically at a micro level, particularly for indoor. This idea that you could set up a zone of beacons that are operating over Bluetooth, which is a relatively short distance technology, and then be able to identify that the customer is at the front door. You've seen this probably in the Apple Store. They're able to tell when you're back by the register and you want the register, when you're in the store, and stuff like that. So we've looked at it technically. It's not really a part of what we're doing data-wise right now, because we're also looking to be on other platforms like Android. And so it's important to understand how the stuff works, but I don't think it's, at this point, it's not really important to what we're looking to do, because what we are then aggregating to is the neighborhood level, or maybe the block level, so that you can understand something's going on in this part of Manhattan in regards to your app or your website. The beacon stuff is really interesting though, because I think we're going to see that. I think Apple in particular is going to be getting, I keep waiting for it to drop a couple WWDCs in a row now, the idea of them doing a little more with indoor mapping. I think that's an area that they're heading to next. And so we'll see kind of where that takes mobile devices and mapping once we go inside from outdoors. And I think beacons will be a big part of that, which is why they're so, they're really investing and trying to get people to use and understand them.
Yeah, the thing that brought this up earlier, as we record this, earlier this week, there were some stories going around about Apple using indoor robots to map different buildings. Mm-hmm. And that sort of brought the whole iBeacon thing back. And it's like, okay, this is really interesting. If now we've heard about the Google cars and maybe the Apple cars going out and researching the maps. Now Apple's deploying robots inside to map the inside of buildings. A lot of advantages, a lot of potential benefits to users. Also, maybe a few scary little privacy things going on there too.
Yeah, yeah, it's absolutely, I think, all this location stuff and the fact that, I mean, it wouldn't be as big a deal if it was just mapping the inside of buildings, but it's mapping inside of buildings in the context of identifying users with mobile devices inside the buildings later. And so, yeah, that's naturally where it comes into play. And so you have to back it all the way up to, okay, what are the assumptions about users with mobile devices, the data on them, the associations that we can make from the data that we learn. And I think increasingly companies are going to have to, like you said, have responsibility there and really understand the implications and the potential abuses. You know, the data lives forever. And so you don't want to be having it sit around and just hope it's not going to be used later. You want to, if you don't need it now, don't collect it or get rid of it soon, and, you know, jettison it as fast as possible. So that's very much on the forefront of what we're thinking about, and what we hope a lot more location companies will be thinking about. And more importantly, I think being transparent about it and just letting people know what they're doing and what they're attempting and what their goals are.
Today's edition of MacVoices is sponsored by Casper, a better mattress for a better night's sleep. To find out more, try one for 100 days and get a $50 discount. Visit casper.com/MacVoices and use the code MacVoices when you place your order. Casper is back this week as a sponsor of MacVoices, and I couldn't be happier. Casper makes mattresses, but not just any mattresses. Great mattresses. Shockingly fair-priced mattresses. Mattresses that have just the right sink, just the right bounce to make them the most comfortable mattresses you've ever slept on. You know how some mattresses wrap around you and you can barely move? And hold too much of your body heat so you end up hot and can't sleep? And, as the old fairy tale goes, are too hard or are too soft? Casper mattresses fit in the just right category. Soft but firm, supportive but not hard. I should know. Before I got my Casper mattress, I went through 3 mattresses in 5 years and wasn't satisfied with any of them. Not only was that an expensive proposition, but it also meant I had to store and move mattresses all the time. And that's not easy. Once my Casper hit my bed, I never looked back. I'll admit I was a bit skeptical, but it truly is the best mattress I've ever slept on. Casper gives you 100 days to sleep on your new mattress and decide if it's for you or not, and makes returns painless if you're not satisfied. But you're going to be satisfied. I didn't need 100 days. In just about 5 days, I was convinced that this was the mattress for me. You can have that same experience. Go to casper.com/MacVoices and use the discount code MacVoices to get $50 off your twin, queen, or king mattress. Order now and it's on its way to you. No shipping, no hidden costs, no visit to the mattress showroom. Just a great American-made mattress, a shockingly fair price, and $50 off to boot. It feels like I'm repeating myself, but there's so many great reasons to try a Casper mattress. The comfort, the price, the ease of purchase. So go to casper.com/MacVoices right now, find the size you want, and don't forget to use the coupon code MacVoices to get $50 off the best night's sleep you've had in a long, long time. Thanks to Casper for supporting MacVoices. Okay, so we ended up at the 30,000-foot level, which I think is really interesting to talk about. Let's pull back down to Mapbox. Can you show us a few things about Mapbox that will help educate people as to what you do and what kind of things it's used for?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to show you a few things. I've got a little bit of a demo I can show on the iPad, and some web pages too to give you an idea of what we're doing on the data side.
That's perfect. Let's do it.
Okay, so what we're looking at here is just kind of our basic overview page of the tools. So the toolkit is for iOS. We're working on Android as well, but so you can put it in iPhone apps and iPad apps. And, it kind of works like you'd expect Apple Maps or Google Maps to work. Some of the main kind of ways that we're differentiating are that we have full stylability of the map. And so you can think of Google Maps kind of looks their way. It's kind of grayish. Apple Maps kind of looks their way. It's a little beige. And ours is a platform where the idea is you can look however you want. Out of the box, we've got a couple styles, kind of like you might be familiar with. but also things like this one or the black or the white here, which are more for data overlays. So you can, if you have more of a visualization oriented app, you could put any sort of data on there and kind of have the map recede into the background a little more and not be as busy or distracting. Something else we're focused on is allowing developers full customizability as far as the code. So all of our tools are open source. I mentioned earlier that we do hosting of the maps and the data and input of data and aggregation and that sort of thing. And our business model is built around that. What we do with the mobile tools is make them all open source so that developers can customize them, report bugs, fix bugs, see why bugs are happening, see if it's really a bug or it's their own misuse, things like that. And so that's all available on GitHub as well. And we link out to that. And one other thing I'd like to show is just a little bit of a comparison as far as the data quality. Here's a couple examples of, you've got Google Maps first, then Apple Maps, and then Mapbox in our default theme. And so one thing we like to focus on is terrain, but while not being distracting. So it just makes for a really good looking map. Here's another great example of just the data quality and the beauty of the tools. We've got Google on the left, Apple in the middle here, and then us on the right. And this is Cape Town, South Africa. And if you just look at the quality of the coast data and the terrain data and compare it to something like what you get from Apple Maps and what is the default and what you can't change, this is one area we're really trying to focus on and just make really beautiful, flexible tools. I mentioned the design aspect of things. This will give you a bit of an idea of the variety that you can do with our tools. These are some maps, some of them more artistic than others. They can fit an aesthetic of a video game or an art project or installation or a company and museum maybe. There's just a huge amount of variety in what you can do. And these are full maps of the world. So, you can zoom all the way down and style the map like this. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before with other toolkits. So we're working on essentially a WYSIWYG editor so that you could change these colors in real time and see them change in your app just by dragging a color wheel, point to streets and remove them or change them to any color that you want. So on the data side of things, I mentioned that we're collecting and aggregating a lot of data and anonymizing it. And we're doing that for two reasons. One, it makes our map data, which is actually OpenStreetMap's data, better, which benefits everybody using OpenStreetMap, but also our platform. And the other is for these analytics. So we've got kind of the standard stuff that you'd expect, like a device breakdown of what versions of iOS people are running, or what devices they've got and what cell networks they're on. All the kind of hard number stuff, but also a beautiful map on the side that shows down to the neighborhood level where app, so that when you zoom in, you can get an idea of where you're actually using the app, what parts of the map they're looking at in your app, and again, like I mentioned, it's all anonymized so that you're not following individual people around the map or individual users. You're seeing general neighborhood trends. Also like I mentioned earlier, with the data side of this and the privacy, it's important to understand and have a plan for it, but also to be transparent about it. And if you'd like to know a bit more about what we're doing with that, we had a great write-up by our CEO a couple weeks ago in TechCrunch about how we protect this data and about these responsibilities that we're trying to help other data companies and mapping and location companies understand. And we're really trying to be a leader here as far as setting a high bar for what companies should be doing and how they should be safeguarding all of this data. So, and the last bit is, like I said, all of our tools are open source, so you can hop over to GitHub, you can check out the code, you can build it yourself, you can report issues and bugs and follow the progress of features, more importantly. So if there's something we're already working on and you're kind of wondering when it's coming, you don't even have to ask, you can go watch the work in real time. And that's something that you don't see from a lot of platforms.
Could you go back to the GitHub screen? I'm sorry, the Mapbox screen. I'm really intrigued there at battery level connection type. It's not surprising you would see carrier, but I'm really intrigued by battery level. So are you reading the battery level off of the devices in use?
Yes. That's just one of many metric numbers that you can get through Apple's APIs. And so we're able to get an idea of what sort of battery life is being used throughout the use of your app. So you might be able to see in aggregate, people use your app when battery level is really low or really high. It's just another thing about this is we're not totally sure what's going to be useful for people. And so our process right now is collect all the basic things that we can, expose them to people, see what's interesting to people and what they might not have considered from an analytics point of view. Another piece about this is we're going to be opening up this as a platform so that you could put certain events in your own app into the analytics and find out, well, users aren't hitting that button or they're never discovering that gesture. We're using that gesture all the time and I was thinking about removing it, but maybe I shouldn't because they really rely on it. That's something we're hoping to add to the analytics side of things as well, along with all of this location and map stuff.
I guess not being a programmer, I'm not familiar with everything that's available through the APIs, so that just surprised me. But after you explain it, I can understand why it's useful. I can also understand why you're trying to ditch some of the data within minutes because you really don't want to keep this around necessarily unless someone is contracting for it or has a real use for it.
Right. Yeah. We're taking some of the more innocuous stuff like battery level or orientation. You know, users are using your app in portrait mode versus landscape mode. So we're not just collecting every possible. We've got kind of a core set of stuff that we're starting with this and then going from here and figuring out what people find useful. And then more importantly, what they want to add from their own app or from the system APIs that Apple gives us.
This is really, really interesting, Justin. I think it gives us all a wake-up call, not just for Mapbox. I mean, we'll talk about that in a second, but just remembering just how much information we're potentially sending to someone by doing something as simple as opening their app and trying it. You know, it's obviously it's not confidential information, but it's still information.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like most of these things that you're seeing on the screen right now, like orientation, connection type, battery level, the retina ratio, pixel ratio, the carrier, the accessibility font size, these are not permissioned properties in the way that your address book or your personal location or some of those system prompts that you'll see this app would like to send you push notifications. These are just there all the time, just like the app is able to know that it's an iPad versus an iPhone. And you really don't know what apps could be collecting this stuff already. And that's why it kind of speaks to this point of transparency and understanding. And part of our model with this also is this whole analytics collection side of things is also open source. It's in that same repository with the map code and the rendering, the collection of it. So we hope to grow it as a platform, but also you could just go in there and see what it's doing. And I realize not everybody can do that. For a lot of folks, the software and the programming is their intellectual property. But we think it's really important at a developer and a framework level to be transparent about this because we're going to be along for the ride with a lot of these apps. People are going to be wondering, well, where's this data going and how long is it staying there? And what is this company's attitude towards this private data? And so that's why communication and transparency part of it is so important.
I want to compliment you too on just like you said, the beauty of the maps. They really are attractive. And it's not something that I think I would have ever paid attention to or known had you not shown me something side by side. And once I see the level of detail, and I can imagine ways. I mean, first of all, it's attractive, but I can also imagine ways that this would be really important. There were pieces there that looked like there were maybe whole bodies of land off a coast that were missing from Apple and Google, and you've got them in such a nice way. So I really like the idea that cartography, maybe as an art form, is not gone, that you are keeping it going in the digital realm.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like that. It's our tools, they're developer tools because they're somewhat technical, but it's meant for artists and designers as well to come in. And we realize, a lot of apps, most apps probably are made by teams of people. And so you've got folks who have a design background, whether it's cartography or not, or a coding background, or just, a sense of aesthetics or usability or context. The geography of a place is hugely important. I'm showing one right now. This is a city in Peru. And I don't think with the Google map or the Apple map, the first two, you get a sense of how this place is situated, but you can kind of see with the terrain. And again, it's important. It's two factors here. One, it's, the base style is not distracting and it's somewhat conservative. But secondly, like this is an open platform. You can turn this stuff off entirely, or you can kind of crank up the level of detail. And we want to make that easy for people. And like you said, make it an art form. So you could, people sweat the details on iOS and Mac and the Apple platforms of pixel perfect placement of buttons and icons and how they scale. And then you just kind of put a beige map in there that looks like everybody else's. And, we're really hoping to speak to that and let you be as custom about that without having to be a map wizard per se.
So are you building in that, for example, the one you have on screen now, that I can turn off, say, the elevations and that part, and maybe make it look a little more like, say, the Google map or the Apple map? Is that something I can do as a user, or is that something that's being decided at the developer level?
It technically would be at the developer level that if they want to expose that in their app. How many knobs or buttons they want to put on there. Again, we try to do it at kind of a high level so that the developer doesn't have to be a map wizard to figure this stuff out, but they could have, they could very easily ship 5 versions of the map inside of the app and give you a slider that lets you pick which one you want to see based on context. And this is especially important when you get to the use of the app. Like if you've got a transit app that's related to buses, you care about road networks. If you're doing a running app or a hiking app, you don't care about interstates. And so you want to de-emphasize or remove completely these things from the map. And so the developer can decide that as part of their whole app experience, or they can give you that control in the app themselves. Or where we'd like to take this is have it be a little more real time. Like, for example, your iPhone, since the 5S, it's got this I think it was the M5 chip that is essentially like a pedometer. And it knows whether you're walking or running or riding a bicycle or a car. And it can determine an activity type. And so the developer or even our framework could take that and have that influence the map in real time. And you could start to do that, at an even tighter feedback loop, because the way these maps are rendered, it's all happening on the client side. It's being drawn on the device. So this stuff is increasingly going to be changing with the context of the user for things like roads and activity type and stuff like that.
So Justin has taken us over now to his iPad, and we're about to see a Mapbox demo on the iPad. Justin, go for it.
Sure. So here we're looking at Portland, and this is kind of the default theme that you'd get with the Mapbox tools. You basically, as you can see, everything is drawn on the client. So all the labels and the fluidity of things, it's all coming in, basically in real time as I'm zooming around. And so one thing you can do with this is you can switch the theme, on the fly to a whole different style of map. And so here we've got one that's a little more subdued color on water, for example, or let's go to like another place in the world, like Paris. And this is just a sample app that we've built with the tools. Here we can go to Paris, France. And so you've got this. Or
to be clear on this, then this is not a demo app that's available. This is just one for you to show.
Right. Yeah, this is a small app that we've built that's basically just a map view with a search bar in it so that you can get an idea of jumping around. It's actually how we test the tools internally when we're developing them.
Okay.
So this is a light theme, which is really, low contrast. And the idea is you would overlay data here, for example, like maybe a user's bicycle routes from their recordings or their runs or something like that. Similarly, you could do a dark theme. So these are pretty simple. Going back to the default one here, though, you can get a sense of just how rich and colorful. We've got all the buildings in here, labels with the names of stores and restaurants, things like that. And like I said, all of this stuff is customizable based on what you want to put in your map. With our web editor, you're able to come in here, click on a park, and change its color with a color wheel, and then ship that in your app. Or, not show parks. Or like I said, don't show interstates because you're doing a running app or a bicycling app, and they just don't apply. So all of this is happening on the client. Another area that we're working on is taking all of this offline without limitations so that you could have all this data down, keep it locally, and then change the style, again, with the context of the app, even when you're not connected to the internet, because the data is the same. You draw the map. It's just different ways of painting the same map. Yeah, that's kind of a quick overview of what the tools look like. You can see it works a lot like you'd expect Google Maps or Apple Maps to. But the neat thing is you can kind of take a peek in at all of this and see how it's built, follow the feature development request your own features or fork this and build your own thing. It's open source and you can kind of run with it.
Justin, I'm a little bit blown away by all this. I don't think I fully appreciated just what goes into that simple little map, or maps that I pop up on my iPhone or iPad and looking for a building, a route, or letting it steer me. And again, the beauty of them is another striking thing. I don't think I'm ever going to look at a map the same way again.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. There's so much to it, and we're trying to bridge that divide of literally a world of data that's coming in and changing all of the time. We just had a bunch of data and work around Nepal and the earthquake there that affects humanitarian efforts, all kinds of aspects to maps, and this data is just constantly changing around the whole world as we shape it, and we're trying to bridge that massive amount of data but make it approachable by normal folks, and being able to have them be able to put it into their apps and customize it and they come at it with a certain window. I have a running app, or I have a location-based game, or I have a find where you parked your car app, or whatever it is. Everything is becoming increasingly about location with mobile devices, and we just want to bridge that gap so that you don't have to deal with that complexity yourself. But yeah, it is always kind of fascinating. Yeah, I actually have the reverse problem, stepping back and kind of just looking at the maps and appreciating them, their overall look and beauty and aesthetic, and not thinking about all the bits and bobs that are going into them under the hood. But it's good. I enjoy it. It's fun, and it's a neat, like I said, it's a world of data, to kind of cliche it a bit, but it's really fun to see all that stuff fly by and see what people do with it, more importantly, and what they build with it.
Yeah, my head is spinning, like you say, with what you could do with this. And I'm not even an app developer or someone that's that familiar with maps, but just seeing what you've shown us, like, wow. The question we always have to get down to at the end of every interview: what kind of pricing are we talking about for what services from Mapbox?
Yeah, so what we've done on the mobile side of things, and what iOS developers would be interested in, is actually there's two sides to things. There's a completely free tier for up to 50,000 monthly active users in your app. So if your app is in that kind of range, you're able to use the mobile tools for free. And our benefit from that is that anonymized location data, which makes our maps better. On the flip side of that, for much higher level plans, or if you choose to and you don't want to necessarily provide that data, we have paid plans starting at $5 a month on up to scale infinitely. Through big, like the big customers that we have, like Foursquare and Pinterest. And they basically measure things by the number of times people are viewing maps in the app. So again, depending on the size of your app, that could range $5, $50 a month. There's kind of a range of things. But what we're trying to do with this new wave of the data aggregation and the dashboards is not just provide the dashboards to the users, but enable developers to switch over from Google Maps or Apple Maps, which are going to be free for most uses, and also use our stuff for free. On the website, it works mostly in the view-based model, but on the mobile side and for iOS, this is what we're doing with up to 50,000 active users a month for free.
You just mentioned Pinterest. If you're allowed to, can you call out some other maybe apps that folks could check out, so that when they go to Pinterest, when they go to Foursquare, they're looking at Mapbox maps? Anybody else that you're using, large or small?
There's some great ones out there. There's a great one done by National Geographic called City Guides, which you can check out, and it has walking tours of some of the world-class cities, and that's built in one of those styles I showed that's kind of a dark black, low contrast, and it kind of highlights the walking route and gives you context. Let's see, some other ones. There's a lot of newspaper sites that will use it. For example, Circa, if you've ever seen the Circa news app on iOS. Whenever you read a story that has a geographic focus to it, they're showing our maps right in line there. So there's lots of uses for it. Like I said, it could relate to the location of the content. It could relate to the location of the user. There's a lot of possibilities. And then, of course, you could check out Pinterest app to see that as well. Their place pins are powered by Mapbox.
Justin, I'm kind of blown away. I know we had a great conversation back at WWDC a couple years ago, but just how far you've come and how much all of it has evolved and all of us have evolved really strikes me. And I would tell folks, even if you're not a developer, just cruise over to Mapbox.com and kind of get a feel for what's going on, so you know what's going on under the hood of the maps when you're looking at them. Because again, I know I'll never look at a map quite the same way again.
Yeah, great. That's good to hear. Yeah. We have a lot of great info over at Mapbox.com. We have a really active blog, and we try to keep that really interesting. So we'll cover everything from like the stuff I mentioned with Nepal and the earthquake relief efforts on to how we're pulling apart iPhones with a screwdriver to figure out battery life with our tools and things like that. It's just a wide range of things for developers and non-developers alike.
Great. Hey, and I want to also thank you and apologize to the users. Justin and I have been fighting some connection issues here. I know some of the audio hasn't been perfect, and we're sorry about that, but it's been too good a conversation to try to start over all the time because you always lose something. So, Justin, thanks for your patience, and folks, thanks for yours.
Yeah, great.
So, last time, Mapbox.com is where you go to find all this stuff out. And, Justin, thank you so much, and I hope to see you at WWDC in San Francisco.
I'll be down there. Yeah, I'll look for you. Great. Thanks for having me on.
All right. Folks, I'm Chuck Joyner. This is MacVoices, Mapbox.com. I think you're going to find it at the very least interesting and maybe useful if you're thinking about developing an app with maps. Until the next time, thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for links, show notes, to subscribe, to connect with Chuck on Twitter, Google+, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and the MacVoices blog. Subscribe to our weekly newsletter, the MacVoices Dispatch, to stay up to date on all the latest MacVoices news from our front page or at macvoices.com/newsletter. Do more with your Apple tech by subscribing to the free MacVoices magazine on Flipboard by visiting macvoices.com/magazine. Advertising and sponsorships handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.